I still remember the way Jason leaned back in his chair, a smirk curling across his face. We were in that crowded coffee shop on Main Street, the one with the squeaky ceiling fan and the cheap burn coffee. "Emily," he said, voice dripping with amusement, "you really think people are going to pay for, what was it again? A subscription box of handmade artisan goods?" He laughed so loud the barista actually looked over, eyebrows raised. A few other people in line turned to stare. My cheeks burned, but I refused to look away. "Come on," he pressed, shaking his head. "Be serious. You're going to waste all your savings chasing a hobby. This is America. People want cheap crap shipped in 2 days. No one cares about artisanal anything." I swallowed, my throat dry as sawdust. Part of me wanted to get up and walk out. But I stayed seated, my hands folded neatly in my lap. "Okay," I said softly, forcing a polite smile. "Thank you for your input." Inside, something cracked. I grew up in a small town outside Portland, Oregon, in a faded yellow house that smelled of cedar and old books. My mother, Margaret, was a school librarian, and my dad, Thomas, fixed cars in our garage after his shift at the mill. They believed in hard work, honesty, and doing something with your hands that you could be proud of. My earliest memories were of sitting cross-legged on the living room rug, helping my mom sort donations for the annual book fair while she told me stories about how every author started somewhere, usually with a rejection letter. She'd hold up a battered manuscript someone had mailed in and say, "Remember, Emily, it doesn't matter if no one believes in you. You have to believe in yourself first." But when I was 22 and said I wanted to start a business, my parents tried to hide their worry behind supportive smiles. I'd graduated from Oregon State with a marketing degree, but instead of applying for jobs, I spent nights sketching out subscription box ideas. Back then, subscription boxes were everywhere: beauty samples, fitness snacks, dog treats. But none of them felt personal. I wanted to create something that honored small artisans. My vision was a monthly box with handmade soaps, candles, local honey, maybe a handwritten note from each maker. I called it Ember and Sage. The name felt warm, like something you'd unwrap on a rainy night. I spent almost a year gathering vendors. I drove up and down the coast in my beat-up Honda Civic, meeting potters in small workshops, beekeepers who sold honey out of their barns, candle makers who hand-poured wax by lamplight. Each time, I felt a flicker of excitement. But when I started telling friends about my plan, most of them smiled politely, eyes glazed. Jason was the worst. Jason and I met at an alumni networking event in Portland. He worked for a big e-commerce company, one of those soulless giants that sold everything under the sun. He'd been successful, no question, but he never let me forget it. The first time I mentioned Ember and Sage, he barked out a laugh. "You want to sell fancy soap?" he said, as if I'd confessed to starting a lemonade stand. I tried to explain my vision, how people were tired of mass-produced junk, how they craved connection to real makers. But he waved it off. "People say they want that," he insisted, "but they won't pay for it." I wish I could say I didn't care, but the truth is I did. At night, lying in bed, I'd replay his words over and over, like a splinter I couldn't dig out. What if he was right? What if no one wanted what I was building? I'd invested almost everything, my savings, my time, my heart. There were days I couldn't afford to put more gas in the Civic. I'd skip meals so I could pay for packaging samples. My mom would call to check in, trying not to sound worried. My dad would slip me $20 bills when I came by. But no matter how scared I felt, I never stopped. I still remember the first time someone placed a pre-order. It was a woman named Jillian from Seattle. She left a note that said, "I love what you're doing. The world needs this." I read her message 5 times, blinking back tears. That single order felt like proof I wasn't crazy. After that, I worked even harder. I taught myself photography so I could take product shots. I learned to design a website. I handwrote thank you notes. And slowly, painfully, orders trickled in. But every time I ran into Jason at a community event or a coffee shop, he found a way to make me feel small. Once, I was setting up a tiny pop-up table at the farmer's market when he walked by, latte in hand. "Still at this?" he said, raising an eyebrow. Well, good luck, I guess. He didn't even wait for an answer before strolling off, already checking his phone. I stood there, surrounded by display baskets I'd stayed up all night arranging, feeling heat crawl up my neck. But as the morning wore on, people stopped by. They touched the handmade soaps, the pottery mugs, the beeswax candles. They smiled. They asked questions. They bought things. A part of me knew I was onto something. The contrast between Jason's scorn and the customer's warmth fueled me more than any pep talk could have. Still, there were nights when I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was just too stubborn to quit. I thought about all the times I'd given up before, on relationships, on college internships I didn't believe in, on hobbies I never finished. This was the first thing I couldn't let go of, no matter how hard it got. And if I failed, at least it would be my failure, built with my own hands. That thought, strangely, gave me comfort. I didn't need Jason's approval. I just needed one more person to believe in Ember and Sage. And then another. And another. Until maybe, just maybe, it wouldn't feel so impossible anymore. It was almost a year to the day after I'd started Ember and Sage when Jason delivered the final blow. The city's Small Business Association hosted an annual showcase downtown. I'd saved up the booth fee for 6 months, $300 that felt like a fortune to me. The night before the event, I could barely sleep. I rehearsed what I'd say, how I'd set up my table, which samples I'd display first. That morning, I packed my little sedan so full I had to bungee cord the trunk shut. My mom came to help, bringing me coffee and muffins, her way of steadying my nerves. "You've worked so hard, honey," she said as we carried boxes inside. "No matter what happens today, I'm proud of you." It shouldn't have mattered, but I needed to hear it. The convention hall was enormous. Rows of booths, banners, people in pressed blazers handing out glossy brochures. My booth looked homemade by comparison. Burlap runners, hand-lettered chalkboards, little bundles of tissue-wrapped samples tied with twine. But when I stood back, taking it in, my chest warmed. It was mine. For the first hour, traffic was slow. I watched people drift past the tech companies and the lifestyle brands with big signs and fancy swag. I tried not to let it get to me. Then, around mid-morning, I spotted Jason across the aisle. He was setting up with a team from his e-commerce firm, all wearing matching branded shirts. For a moment, he didn't see me. I could have pretended I hadn't noticed him either. But when he turned and his eyes landed on my booth, there was no escaping it. He walked over, his smile already smug. "Emily," he said, drawing out my name like it amused him. "Didn't expect to see you here." I tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. "Hi, Jason." He glanced over my display, one eyebrow arched. "Still doing the artisan thing?" "It's going well," I lied, even though I'd barely broken even that month. He chuckled under his breath. "That's cute. You know, if you ever decide to be serious about e-commerce, I might have a place for you." I swallowed. "Thanks, but I'm good." "Sure," he said, drawing out the word. Then he leaned in a little, lowering his voice. "Just remember, most people don't want to think. They want convenience. You're trying to change how people shop, and that's noble, but it won't scale." He straightened, looking satisfied with himself. "Anyway, best of luck. Maybe I'll check out your booth later if I have time." He walked off without waiting for a reply, his team trailing behind. My stomach twisted. I felt small, foolish, like a child playing shop while the adults made real deals. The rest of the day was a blur. A few people stopped to look, but I couldn't shake Jason's words. "It won't scale." That phrase played in my head every time someone glanced at my table and kept walking. By mid-afternoon, I was packing up a box when an older woman approached. She picked up a lavender sachet and smiled. "My daughter loves these," she said. "She just moved to Chicago. Can you ship there?" I blinked, snapping out of my fog. "Yes," I said quickly. "Absolutely." She bought 3 boxes on the spot. As I rang her up, I felt the tiniest flicker of something, a reminder that Jason's opinion wasn't the only one that mattered. Still, when I got home that night, I sat on my living room floor and cried. I thought about quitting. I thought about applying for a real marketing job, the kind with a steady paycheck and health insurance. But when I pictured myself in a cubicle, taking orders from someone like Jason, I felt sick. I'd rather fail on my own terms than succeed on his. I wiped my eyes, stood up, and went to the kitchen. While the kettle boiled for tea, I opened my laptop and looked at the Ember and Sage website. It wasn't flashy. The photos were simple, the layout homemade. But it was real. I clicked through the customer reviews. Only a handful, but every one heartfelt. Beautiful packaging. Loved the personal note. Reminded me of my grandmother's house. That night, something inside me settled. Maybe Jason was right. It might never scale. But for the people who'd taken a chance on me, it mattered. And for the first time, that felt like enough. The next morning, I woke up with swollen eyes and a raw throat, but also with a decision. I would stop looking for his approval. I wouldn't check his LinkedIn profile. I wouldn't compare my revenue to his. I wouldn't replay his smirk in my mind. I would build Ember and Sage quietly, however slowly it needed to grow. If it failed, I'd fail on my own terms. And if it succeeded, well, maybe one day he'd see my name somewhere he couldn't ignore. But whether he ever did or not, I was done giving him power over my story. I was done letting anyone else decide what was worth believing in. After that night, I began to pull back from everything that wasn't essential. I didn't make some big declaration or post an angry manifesto online. There was no dramatic exit from the networking groups or the entrepreneur meetups, where everyone wore forced smiles and bragged about funding rounds they'd never close. I simply stopped showing up. I stopped answering texts from acquaintances who only wanted to gossip about who was failing and who was getting press coverage. I muted every account on social media that made me feel small, especially Jason's, with his smug posts about disrupting the supply chain and dominating the marketplace. I didn't need to watch him to know what he thought of me. In those first few weeks of silence, the emptiness was loud. My phone barely buzzed. The days stretched long and unstructured. Part of me felt like I was disappearing. But as the noise faded, something else took root. Focus. I started each morning before dawn. I'd make a pot of strong coffee and sit in my little home office with a legal pad, writing down ideas. Instead of worrying about how to impress people like Jason, I asked myself what the customers I already had loved most. The answer was simple: the stories. They didn't buy my boxes just for the soap or the honey. They bought them because each product felt like a small piece of someone's life. A potter's hands shaping clay, a beekeeper tending hives in the rain, a candle maker blending essential oils late at night. So I leaned into that. I started calling my vendors, asking about their histories. I wrote profiles about their work and posted them on the website. I shared photos of their studios, their families, their craft. Within weeks, traffic to the site began to rise. Not by thousands, just by a steady trickle of people who cared about what I was doing. I stopped chasing partnerships with influencers who'd never tried my products. Instead, I sent boxes to small bloggers with loyal followings. I didn't beg them for coverage. I simply asked if they'd like to experience Ember and Sage for themselves.
Most said yes.
One night, I got an email from a blogger named Hannah, whose site focused on slow living and handmade goods. She'd posted a review that was so heartfelt, I read it twice just to let it sink in. Opening this box felt like being welcomed into someone's home, she wrote. Every detail was thoughtful. Every piece felt chosen with care. That was the moment I realized something. My business didn't have to be big to be meaningful. I didn't need to scale like Jason's company. I just needed to serve the people who valued what I offered. The more I embraced that, the freer I felt. I stopped checking my revenue against anyone else's. I stopped measuring my worth by how quickly I was growing. I started caring more about doing the work well. The next time Jason's name came up, someone at a farmer's market asked if I knew him. I felt an unexpected calm. Yeah, I said, smiling faintly. I know Jason. But I didn't feel the need to explain or defend myself. In the evenings, when the orders were packed and the house was quiet, I'd pour a glass of wine and look over the day's shipments. Each label felt like a small victory. I no longer fantasized about proving him wrong. I fantasized about staying true to what I loved, no matter how many people told me it wasn't enough. When the next holiday season came, I decided to try something I'd been too scared to attempt before, a holiday collection. I reached out to every artisan I'd met that year and asked if they wanted to contribute limited edition items.
Almost all of them said yes.
For 2 weeks, my tiny office was filled with boxes, hand-painted ornaments, pine-scented candles, spiced cocoa mixes, little jars of cranberry jam. I spent hours photographing everything myself, writing descriptions, designing labels. On launch day, I sat at my desk, heart racing, refreshing the website every few minutes. At first, nothing. Then 1 order. Then 3. Then 10. By midnight, the collection was almost sold out. I closed my laptop and leaned back, covering my face with my hands. Not because I finally felt like I'd made it, but because I realized I didn't care if Jason ever knew. I had stopped needing to prove anything. My silence wasn't a retreat. It was freedom. It was early spring when I first heard about Nora Callahan. I didn't know her personally. She was an editor at a well-known regional lifestyle magazine called Northwest Living. I'd seen her name on mastheads, usually attached to features about small farms and heritage crafts. One morning, as I was sipping my coffee and packing up orders, an email came in. Subject: feature story, Ember and Sage. I thought it was spam at first, but when I opened it, my breath caught. Hi, Emily. I've been following Ember and Sage since last fall. One of our contributors ordered a box as a gift and shared it with our team. I've been quietly reading your blog posts and admiring the way you highlight artisans. I'd love to talk about a possible feature in our summer issue, spotlighting how small businesses are redefining handmade in the Pacific Northwest. Let me know if you'd be interested. Warmly, Nora Callahan. My hands were shaking as I reread it. I hadn't pitched her. I hadn't begged for coverage. Someone had simply found me. I replied as calmly as I could, setting up a time for a call the following week. When we spoke, Nora's voice was warm, almost conspiratorial, like she was letting me in on a secret. Emily, I have to tell you, she said, I was so tired of seeing the same generic subscription boxes. Yours felt alive. Like every piece mattered. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. Thank you. I managed. That means a lot. Over the next few weeks, she asked me questions about everything, where the name came from, how I'd found my vendors, what kept me going when it was so hard. I answered honestly. I told her about driving up and down the coast, about the first pre-order, about how I'd nearly quit. She listened without interrupting. A few weeks later, when the magazine arrived in my mailbox, I sat on my porch steps, holding it in my hands, unable to turn the pages. When I finally opened the spread, there it was, 4 glossy pages about Ember and Sage. There were photos of my products styled beside mugs of steaming tea and fresh flowers. A pull quote in bold letters read, "When you open one of Emily Harper's boxes, you remember that someone's hands made every single thing inside." I read the piece twice, tears blurring the words. That afternoon, my inbox filled with messages. Some were from strangers thanking me for bringing beauty into their homes. Some were from artisans asking how they could partner with me. But one message stood out. It was from an old college friend named Mark. He'd never paid much attention to Ember and Sage before. Hey just saw the article about you in Northwest Living. Funny story, Jason shared it on LinkedIn this morning. He wrote some long caption about authentic brand building and said he admired your persistence. I blinked at the screen. Jason shared it. Part of me wanted to laugh. The same man who'd once called my idea a hobby was now using it as an example of good business. I clicked over to LinkedIn. Sure enough, there was his post. Incredible work by Emily Harper of Ember and Sage. Proof that when you stay true to your vision, you can build something people care about. We can all learn from her commitment to storytelling and community. It had dozens of likes and comments. My stomach twisted, but not in the way it used to. A year ago, I would have read that and felt vindicated, like maybe I finally mattered because he said I did. But now, all I felt was the clarity that he hadn't created anything himself. He'd just decided my story was worth borrowing when it made him look insightful. I closed the browser tab without responding. Later that evening, Nora called me. She sounded excited. Emily, I don't know if you realize this, but your site traffic has exploded. People are sharing the article like crazy. I saw, I said quietly. It's a lot. I hope you know you deserve every bit of this, she said. This isn't just about a pretty box. You've built something people feel connected to. Her words sank in, gentler and truer than Jason's applause. After we hung up, I sat in my dim living room, the magazine open beside me, and felt something I hadn't in years.
Peace.
It wasn't that I didn't care anymore. I did. But I cared more about the people who'd believed in me when no one was watching. I cared more about the woman in Seattle who'd left that first note. I cared more about the artisans who trusted me to tell their stories. Jason's opinion, whether scorn or praise, was just noise. I was finally learning how to tune it out. It didn't take long for Jason to reach out directly. I was packing orders one evening when my phone buzzed with a new email notification. I almost ignored it, but then I saw the sender. From Jason Miller. Subject: exciting collaboration opportunity. My stomach tightened reflexively. For a moment, I considered deleting it unread. But curiosity got the better of me. I clicked it open. Hi, Emily. I hope you've been well. I've been following Ember and Sage's incredible growth. Congratulations on all the recent press. It's very well deserved. I've been thinking a lot about how authentic, small-batch products are resonating with modern consumers. My team and I are exploring ways to partner with artisan brands, and I immediately thought of you. We'd love to discuss a strategic collaboration, something that would maintain your unique voice while scaling your distribution and streamlining logistics. I think together we could reach a much broader audience. Let me know when you're available to connect. I'm excited to see what's possible. Best, Jason. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. My first reaction wasn't anger. It was something closer to disbelief. For so long, I'd imagined this moment would feel triumphant. I thought I'd feel vindicated, like his validation finally proved I'd been right all along. But all I felt was the hollow realization that this wasn't about me. It wasn't about respect. It was about him seeing an opportunity to latch onto something that was already working. I didn't reply. 2 days later, he tried again. This time it was a text. Jason, hey Emily, wanted to follow up on my email. I think this could be huge for you. Let's at least chat? I let the message sit there, unread, while I finished labeling shipments. It was almost funny how quickly someone who had dismissed me could flip his tone once he sensed profit. That weekend, I drove out to the coast to visit one of my longtime vendors, Maribel, a ceramicist who made the little speckled mugs that had become Ember and Sage's signature item. She and I sat at her kitchen table, drinking mint tea, the Pacific wind rattling the windows. When I told her about Jason's offer, she looked at me over the rim of her mug. Do you want to work with him? She asked, her voice mild. No, I said immediately. Maribel nodded slowly. Then there's your answer. I laughed, but it came out shaky. It's just he was so sure I'd fail. And now he wants to claim he helped you succeed. She set her mug down gently. People like that always come around when they smell success. Her words stuck with me the whole drive home. The next week, I started getting calls from people in Jason's orbit, people who had never spoken to me before. One woman left a voicemail that dripped with bright, false enthusiasm. Hi, Emily. I'm with Jason's team. We're huge fans of your brand. We're putting together a press package highlighting innovative partnerships and would love to include Ember and Sage if you're open to it. A day later, a LinkedIn message arrived from another colleague. You're doing amazing things, Emily. It would be a shame to miss this chance to amplify your mission. They all said the same thing in different words. Let us take credit for what you built. I knew what they were doing. They weren't offering help out of generosity. They were trying to protect their image, to spin a narrative that they'd been on my side all along. The old me would have agonized over whether to reply. I would have worried that turning them down made me ungrateful, or difficult, or small-minded. But the new me, the me who'd learned to trust her own voice, felt something closer to pity. One evening, my mom called. She'd seen Jason's latest post on social media, where he'd shared another photo of my products, captioned with something about championing local makers. "I can't believe he's acting like he was supportive," she said, her voice tight with protective anger. "You know you don't owe him anything, right?" "I know," I said softly. And for the first time, I really did. 2 weeks later, Jason emailed again, this time with an official proposal attached. A glossy PDF full of charts and projected revenue figures. Words like synergy and market capture were scattered everywhere. I skimmed it, barely absorbing the details. In the end, all it amounted to was this. He wanted to use my story to make his company look progressive and thoughtful. He wanted to profit off the narrative of supporting authentic brands, even though he'd never believed in mine. I closed the file. That evening, I drafted a short reply. "Hi, Jason. Thank you for your interest and for taking the time to share your proposal. At this point, I'm not looking to pursue outside partnerships. Wishing you all the best. Emily." I hovered over the send button for a moment, feeling the old doubts stir. What if I was making a mistake? What if I'd regret it later? But then I thought about every late night, every rejection, every time I'd had to find courage alone. And I pressed send. There was no satisfaction, no adrenaline rush. Just a clean, quiet certainty. The next morning, I woke up to one more email from Jason. "Emily, I have to say, I'm disappointed. I was really hoping you'd be more open-minded about working together. But if you change your mind, let me know." I didn't reply. I didn't owe him an explanation. He had already shown me exactly who he was. And I was finally done pretending that was someone I needed in my corner. It was late May when I got the letter that would change everything again. I'd come home from the post office after mailing out the Mother's Day shipments, dozens of boxes stacked in the back of my Civic, each tied with pale green ribbon. My shoulders ached, and I'd already promised myself I'd take the evening off. But when I stepped inside, there was a small envelope on the welcome mat. My name was handwritten across the front in looping script. No return address. I almost set it aside for later, but something made me slip my thumb under the seal. Inside was a card, thick cream stock with a watercolor of wildflowers on the front. I opened it and began to read. "Dear Emily, you don't know me, but you changed my life. Last October, my daughter sent me one of your boxes. It arrived during a week when I could barely get out of bed. My husband had passed away that summer after 40 years together, and nothing felt real anymore. I was going through the motions, making tea I never drank, sitting by the window for hours. When I opened your package, I cried for the first time in weeks. There was something about the care you put into every detail, the little note explaining who made each thing, the sprig of dried lavender tucked between the jars. It reminded me that the world still had softness in it, even if I couldn't feel it yet. Since then, I've ordered 3 more boxes, 1 for myself, and 2 for friends who are going through their own losses. Your work has become a small thread connecting me back to life. I just wanted you to know that what you're doing matters. With gratitude, Helen Montgomery." I read the letter twice. The second time, tears blurred the words until I could hardly see. I sat down on the floor, the card pressed against my heart. All at once, every humiliating memory, Jason's laughter, the empty farmers' markets, the nights I thought I'd made a terrible mistake, felt so small compared to this. This was why I'd kept going. Not for press coverage. Not for validation from people like Jason. For this. For the person alone in her kitchen who needed a reminder that beauty hadn't vanished. Later that night, after I'd cleaned up the packing materials and washed the dishes, I sat at my desk and drafted a reply. "Dear Helen, I don't have the right words to thank you for your letter. It's easy to forget, sometimes, that what I do matters to anyone. Your note was the most meaningful gift I could have received. I'm so sorry for your loss. And I'm so honored that my work could bring even a little bit of comfort. With all my heart, Emily." I printed it, folded it carefully, and tucked it in an envelope. In the weeks that followed, I thought about Helen often. When I felt overwhelmed, I would picture her sitting by her window, unwrapping a box she didn't expect to matter, and finding something that made her feel a little less alone. That image steadied me more than any business metric ever could. And as summer came, I noticed something else. My customer base was growing in a way I hadn't predicted. Not because of Jason's LinkedIn posts or any influencer shoutouts, but because people were telling each other. A woman in Colorado ordered a box and left a note. My sister in Oregon sent me one, and it was the first time in ages I felt seen. A man in Vermont ordered for his mother. She doesn't get out much anymore, and I want her to feel special. Every week, more stories arrived, testaments to how far a little kindness could travel. One Saturday morning, I was labeling shipments when my phone rang. It was Nora Callahan from the magazine. "Emily," she said, sounding almost breathless. "I wanted you to be the first to know. Our story about Ember and Sage won a regional press award." My mouth fell open. "Are you serious?"
Very.
The judges said it was one of the most moving pieces they'd read all year. I pressed a hand over my heart, trying to steady the rush of emotion. "Thank you," I whispered. "No," Nora said gently. "Thank you for proving that small can be powerful." After we hung up, I sat there in the quiet, thinking about the first day I'd met Jason in that crowded coffee shop. I remembered how small I'd felt, how convinced I'd been that he held some key to legitimacy I would never find. Now I knew the truth. The only key was caring enough to keep going, even when no one believed in you. That night, I shared Helen's letter on my website, just the part where she described how the box had made her feel. I ended the post with a simple sentence. "This is why I do it." Within hours, dozens of comments poured in. Customers sharing their own stories, friends cheering me on, strangers who'd never ordered but promised they would now. And somewhere in all that gratitude and connection, I felt something settle into place. I didn't need Jason's approval. I didn't even need his awareness. I had something better, a quiet, honest certainty that what I was building mattered. That night, I poured a glass of wine and sat out on the porch, the summer air warm on my skin. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel proud. Not because I'd proved someone wrong, but because I'd proved myself right. It was almost a year to the day since the Northwest Living article when Jason tried one last time. I was in the middle of packing orders, summer citrus candles, jars of wildflower honey, and hand-stitched linen napkins, when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. A minute later, a text arrived. "Jason. Hey Emily, it's been a while. I'd love to catch up. Maybe we can finally have that conversation about collaborating. Let me know when you're free." I set the phone face down on the counter. It felt strange, the way my body didn't react the way it used to. No twist in my stomach. No heat in my cheeks. Just nothing. I finished taping up the last box, printed the shipping labels, and loaded them into the car. When I got home, the phone was still sitting there, the text unread. In the early days, I would have obsessed over how to answer. I would have crafted a careful reply, polite but firm, maybe even a little apologetic, afraid he'd think I was ungrateful or arrogant. But that night, as the sun slipped behind the trees, it finally sank in that I didn't owe him anything. He wasn't my mentor. He wasn't my friend. He wasn't even an obstacle anymore. He was just a man who had laughed at something he didn't understand, until he realized it was working. I opened the message and typed 3 words. "I'm not interested." Then I pressed send and set the phone aside. The next day, he called again. This time I picked up. "Emily," he said, his voice bright with forced warmth. "Hey, I'm glad you answered. Look, I know you're busy, but I really think we'd both benefit from—" I didn't interrupt him. I let him keep talking. He went on for almost 5 minutes about synergy, market expansion, all the ways he could help me scale Ember and Sage. When he finally paused for breath, I took a slow sip of my coffee and spoke as evenly as I could. "Jason," I said, "I appreciate that you're reaching out. But I'm not interested in working together. Not now, not in the future." He laughed, a small, incredulous sound.
"Come on.
You're telling me you'd rather stay small forever?" I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. "I'd rather stay true to what I built," I said quietly. "And it's not small to the people it matters to." There was a beat of silence on the other end of the line. "You're making a mistake," he said finally. "I've made a lot of mistakes," I said. "But this isn't one of them." And before he could say anything else, I ended the call. There was no anger in me, no triumph, just a clean, final sense of peace. That evening, I took a walk through my neighborhood, the warm dusk settling over the rooftops. I thought about all the hours I'd spent worrying about Jason's opinion, about every sleepless night I'd lain awake, replaying his dismissive smirk. It felt so far away now, like something that had happened to another person. When I got home, I opened my email and saw a last message from him. "Emily, if you change your mind, you know where to find me." I didn't reply. I deleted it, emptied the trash, and closed my laptop. Then I went into the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and stood by the window watching the last light fade. I thought about all the times I'd imagined this moment. I'd picture myself shouting, gloating, throwing his own words back in his face. But as I stood there, the air soft and golden, I realized I didn't need any of that. I didn't need him to understand. I didn't need to prove anything. I'd already won. Not because I'd built a business that finally earned his respect, but because I'd learned to respect myself enough to say no. No explanation. No apology.
Just no.
And in that quiet refusal, I found more freedom than I'd ever imagined. When I think back to the beginning, those early mornings in my cramped apartment, the boxes stacked higher than my head, I remember how small I felt. I remember the way Jason looked at me across that cafe table, his smile edged with condescension as he told me my idea was sweet, but impractical. I remember how I went home and cried because part of me believed him. I think about all the times I doubted myself, all the nights I lay awake, wondering if he was right, if I was wasting my time. I thought success would look like proving him wrong. I thought I'd feel whole when he finally saw my work and admitted I'd been right all along. But standing here now, years later, in a quiet house full of the scent of beeswax and rosemary, watching the shipping labels slide off the printer, I know the truth. It never mattered whether he believed in me. It never mattered whether anyone did. All that ever mattered was that I kept believing in the small, stubborn voice inside me that said, "This is yours. Keep going." If you're watching this and you feel invisible, or small, or silly for dreaming about something no one else can see, I want you to hear me. You don't have to wait for permission. You don't have to wait for someone in a blazer and polished shoes to say your idea is worthy. You don't have to prove your worth to the people who never tried to understand you. You are allowed to build something out of love. You are allowed to care about what feels small to the rest of the world. And you are allowed to say no to anyone who tries to diminish your work, even if they come back later, pretending they always believed in you. I think about Helen's letter often. The way she wrote about that box arriving on her doorstep, the way it made her feel connected again. That was never going to show up in a revenue report. But it was real. It mattered. And that is the lesson I wish I could have learned sooner. Growth isn't always about scaling. Sometimes growth is about standing still long enough to know who you are so that when the noise comes, you can stay rooted in what you love. I don't pretend that I have it all figured out. Some months are still lean. Some nights I still lie awake, wondering if I'm doing enough, if I'm enough. But I no longer measure my worth by whether Jason Miller thinks my business is a smart bet. I measure it by the quiet moments of connection, by every note that says, "You made my day feel brighter." And that is more than enough. So, if you need a sign to keep going, let this be it. If you need someone to tell you that you're not too small, not too late, not too naive, let me be the one to say, you are exactly where you're meant to be. Your work matters. Your vision matters. Even if they don't understand it. Especially if they don't understand it. And sometimes, not showing up to the table where you were once mocked is the most powerful thing you can do. You don't owe them your story. You don't owe them your triumph. You don't owe them your presence. You can simply walk away, carrying your hard-won peace in both hands. And when they finally come around, when they finally see the value in what you built with your bare hands, you can smile and keep going. Not because you need their approval, but because you've already learned the most important thing. You were never too small. You were just too real for people who pretend. And you always will be.